today I am with Claire Titla and we
Titley.
are Titley, sorry.
That's okay.
We're going to talk about the very entertaining documentary about Nasubi. Um, I would like to start the interview with asking you what gave you the motivation to do this documentary?
Mm. I found the story. Um, I was supposed to be working on something else, and I got kind of lost in the internet and came across it. And obviously it's a kind of a like an insane story, and I was like, I need to just follow this up. But one of the things that I found was a lot of what I not everything, but a lot of what I found online was quite perfunctory. It was quite sort of point and laugh at the Japanese, and it kind of ended there. And all my burning questions were about Nasubi and his story. And I really wanted to kind of get to know him. I really wanted to know what had happened next, how it had affected him, all these other questions. So that was what kind of drove me forward. And that's when I kind of approached him. I said, that I want to tell this story, but I want to tell your story, not just the story of the show.
Are the question and interviews in the documentary made by yourself?
Oh, well, that's like a really interesting. There's not a short answer. So basically, all the interviews in the documentary of all the contributors are by myself, along with my Japanese producer Megami Inman. So we had this. By the time we'd kind of got round to recording the interviews, COVID had set in. So this was the worst possible timing. And eventually it became quite clear that I wasn't going to be able to go over to Japan because they just weren't letting anybody in the country that didn't have a Japanese passport. So Megami Inman, my producer, she was able to go. And so we'd always had this idea anyway that the way in which we would do the interviews would be that she would, because I don't speak Japanese, very good Japanese, and Nasubi doesn't speak English, that she would be the person in front of the camera asking the questions. We would work really closely together, and she's a fantastic interviewer as well. We were both very much on the same wavelength, and we do them together in that way. And I would just be behind the camera, but it ended up by being kind of several thousand miles behind the camera in the end. And so she went over there. She did the quarantine period, which was quite sort of meta because she had to spend 2 weeks locked in a hotel room, which was, uh, and I did that with her. So I got onto Japanese time for the whole for that period of time, for the interview as well, for all the interview, for all the whole shooting period. So I was living on Japanese time in the UK, and actually it ended up meaning that we really kind of had much more prep time than you would normally do, because normally you have all these ideas, you have all this prep time, but you don't actually do it. But we had all this uninterrupted time where everybody in the UK on the production was asleep, so I was awake on Japanese time with her. She couldn't go anywhere or do any recce, so we were literally kind of like on Zoom or whatever it was together, just kind of talking through our ideas about the interview, talking about our philosophy about interviewing, documentary interviewing in general. And by the time the interviews came round, we were like, we'd become the same person, and she was asking questions just as I'd sort of think, oh, it'd be good to ask that. And she would be asking them. It was uncanny, but
Wow.
so I turned into a weird advantage, although I wouldn't choose to do it that way again.
And was there any challenges related to the making of the contestant outside COVID? I've seen that there are some never seen before footage from A Life in Prizes. How hard was it to get these?
Yeah, it was the archive was one of the biggest stumbling blocks, because I mean, first of all, we didn't have the rushes, the dailies. We just had, what existed. But the negotiation of the archive was complicated for numerous reasons, but not least because you were dealing with lawyers in LA, London, and Tokyo. So that was like another added kind of complication of it all. But it was interesting actually, because one of the key players in helping us negotiate the archive was actually Toshio Tsuchiya, the producer that appears in the show. and he was still working at the company that made the TV show, and he was just very supportive and helpful. So I mean, I was actually quite grateful to him for that.
And have you met Nasubi in person?
Yes, yeah. So he'd actually come over to the UK prior to us starting filming. And when we were trying to make the film and get funding for it, and he'd come over to the UK, we had this kind of like crazy holiday where we went and did some sort of like tourist sites around England. We went to the Isle of Wight, and we just kind of really got to know each other with the help of uh, um, Caroline Buxton, an amazing interpreter who lives close by, and and that was really great. So in a weird way, at least when I was filming, you know, the fact that wasn't there, we'd met and we'd hung out, and it was fine. And actually, it's been so lovely post the film coming out because we've had so many opportunities to like hang out so much more. We were, you know, in New York and in Sydney, and then literally just last week we were all in London going around the Tower of London together. So it was it's been really nice actually.
And your documentary has been nominated as Best Documentary Feature in 4 film festival. How do you feel about that?
Oh, um, ridiculously kind of flattered and honored and every, you know, all of that. It's such a long journey making films generally, but docs and, you know, like particularly a long slog, and this one really feels like it. So when you get to share it with audiences, that's just kind of amazing, and that's kind of all you could kind of ask for. So to have like nominations like that is like icing on the cake, really.
And how was your experience with the Audience Movie Festival?
I found it really interesting because you know, you have this baby that you hold on to for such a long time, and then finally you let it out into the world. And what I've really loved is everybody's different opinions, and everybody's got a different idea about what they feel the film is about for them. And that really not surprised me, because while I was making the film, it's always been a kind of a water cooler dinner party, you know, like one of those ones that everybody talks about a lot for ages. But it was interesting when people would come up and go, your film, I can see it's all about coercive control. That's like the biggest theme. And I'm like, oh, you know, and other people are like, I can see your film's all about loneliness. And that really, and people feel it really strongly, you know, these different themes. So that's been interesting. That's been really interesting.
I've been told in the past that you know, presenting a film in a festival was like a rock show because there's a lot of mixed reaction. People are crying, people are laughing. Uh, I'm pretty sure you enjoyed it. And about the moral of the movie, what are your thoughts on exploitation about TV industry, you know, reality TV show? Because in the case of Nasubi, he's been bullied practically all of his life, and this is absolutely crazy, the amount of resilience that this person have. What are your thoughts about this topic?
I think I think it's we need to kind of remember that we're looking back at this show, and we've got this behind, you know, we've got the benefit of 20 years or more or whatever of reality TV history behind us with which to judge it, but they didn't have this at all. So they were winging it, you know, they were making it up as they went along, and I'm not defending them at all, but it's just, you know, we've got to remember which lens we're kind of looking at it through in that way. But I do, um, you know, some people sort of say, oh, it's great that we've come so far. And I wonder really sometimes when you see what's out there and the things that are happening to people in reality TV shows, contestants, how far we've really actually come, you know. And
Right.
it's quite easy to look back at this and kind of go, oh, isn't it shocking part of history? And, you know, I remember talking to Suchiya before we made the film. I met him in London, and you know, we warned him and said, you know, how people might, you know, uh, interpret what he's done, and he said, well, in Japan we would never make anything as horrific as Love Island. And I was thinking, well, actually, he had at the time he had a point, because there have been two suicides related to that program. So yeah, I think I'd love people to go away and reflect on their own relationship, not just with reality TV and media, but with social media as well, and how much we, give away of our lives for free. I think that would make me happy if people came away with that.
100%. I totally agree. I got the last question. For someone who doesn't know about the story of Nasubi, what would you tell them to expect?
I would say it's a film about the world's craziest reality TV show, but more than that, it's about a man who goes looking for connection and perhaps looks in the wrong places and finds it in unexpected ones. But I'd say before somebody watched it to sort of buckle up, because it's quite a wild ride.
Thank you so much. It was a very fantastic conversation, and
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm very happy, and actually I feel very honored to do an interview about this story because I've been following this story on YouTube for years,
Oh,
and
wow.
I didn't know that there was a documentary that has been made. And when I watched it, I was gripped. It was and captivated until the end. And when I contacted Angie, she told me, "Oh, do you want to see this movie?" And I was like, "Oh, hell yeah!" And is it possible to do an interview? And I was I was gagged. So thank you so much for your time and
Oh,
for
that means a lot.
sharing.
It must have been like, yeah, that's a lot of pressure on if you've been following the story for a long time. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Well, I'm gonna wish you to have a wonderful day and much success for your upcoming work.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you. Lovely
you.
to meet you.